This is a recording of Chapter 13 of Survive, the Atlantis Grail, Book 4, by Vera Nazarian. STA Director Rovad Benu arrives shortly with a troubled expression on his long, leathery face, and for the next hour, Asen and I observe the others bring him into the fold, then argue. Rovad Benu is also not a young man, and most of his dark brown hair has left him years ago, so there isn't all that much left to dye. But he attempts to gild it nevertheless, all around the large bald spot. He wears a light blue coat-like tunic of thin fabric over his jacket, suggesting he had arrived directly from a science facility and forgot to make himself presentable for the Imperial Palace. But none of it matters. Now Benu knows. Unbelievable. You're telling me the research site where I perform most of my work is not the high-security basement of the stadium structure, but is in fact the inside of the ancient colony vessel? And it's buried underneath the city? Director Benu asks in nervous voice. And you say there are levels that go even deeper than the yellow Sector 79? Why was I not told about any of this? Because up till now it did not concern you, Director Theophone says. Oh, and it apparently concerns you? The STA director retorts with growing indignation. How is it that the venerable Science and Technology Agency, working for decades inside this relic, is kept ignorant while the upstart Atlantis Central Agency, only recently formed to liaison with Earth, is apparently deemed relevant enough to be granted this critical inside knowledge? What else am I unaware of? Apparently quite a few things, and not just sensitive information, but details that could be crucial to our current field of scientific knowledge. You always know what you need to know, Benu, Shirachtet says in his calming voice. Same for Theophone and other IEC members. It is how things work. There is no slight intended. We each have our place in the scheme of things. Oh, and I suppose you and your holy caste always get to decide who knows what. As the first priest of Cassiopeia, granted authority unto the ages by the divine ancestors of the dynasty we serve, it is my ancient role and function. Therefore, yes, I do. Enough! The Imperator interrupts them. Stop bringing up my Chazuf ancestors, Shirachtet. I choke on them every night as I lie in bed thinking of all the ancient shebet they passed on to me in the form of imperial duty. And you, we need a hard solution to this crisis, and it's why I called you, Benu. You have been informed. You now have been privileged information that must not leave this room, and you will remain discreet. My Imperial Sovereign, yes, of course. And Director Benu inclines his balding head with courtly resignation. The Imperator exhales fiercely. Now then, let us discuss our options. Rovad Benu scratches the back of his head, causing a few of his remaining gilded hairs to stand up messily, then frowns and glances down at his feet and around the room. His darting gaze lands upon Asen and me, and I see him blink a few times as though considering us. For starters, I'd like to see it, he says. The Grail Monument. That is the ship. Is it broadcasting now? Not now, but judging by its earlier behavior, it soon will be, Hijab Theophon says. And haven't you seen enough of it from the inside? Knowing what I now know. Rovad Benu shakes his head thoughtfully. It will be with a new perspective. How in the name of all divinities did we as a culture manage to keep the original colony ship hidden from the public for millennia? All public historical archives claim it's long lost, but it's buried right here under our noses. Having worked there myself, I'd say it's easy to think of it as just a very old underground structure, Director Theophone says in a conciliatory tone. Rovad Benu rubs his forehead and attempts to pace in a very crowded small spot. Have a seat, the Imperator tells him. My son and his bride can stand. And he glances at us with subtle mockery, since only one unoccupied chair remains in the room. Asen doesn't show any reaction and continues to stand with his arms folded. I am at his side before the desk. Director Benu looks at us briefly, then takes the chair, pulling it closer. Meanwhile, with your permission, my Imperial Sovereign, ACA Director Theophon calls up a small screen from the nearest wall and sings the sequence to display the media feeds. The sound comes on, and there's a blast of crowd noise. He zooms in on a bird's-eye aerial view of the downtown complex, taken from one of the media network hover cars, which shows a sizable crowd gathered below. An agitated voice of the commentator is speaking over the noise. As you can see, the protester crowds are spilling around the complex of the interconnected stadiums and other venues for at least 18 intersections, and they are carrying signs and holo projectors. Not only is the Atlantis Grail Stadium itself completely surrounded, despite the possible dangers of the unexplained sound explosions coming from the site all throughout the day, but so are the red and blue forums right next door, all the way across the Golden Grail Plaza to the entire breadth of the Imperial Kemet Stadium. Various protest groups appear to be GGR-inflamed ordinary residents who want the games to be resolved and an end to their betting. However, and let's zoom in, quite a few groups seem to express other agendas, including the various conspiracy proponents. The camera swoops down and focuses on a street-level view, and the noise of the crowds becomes deafening. We see Poseidon residents, men, women, teens, and even younger children. Everyone is pumping upraised fists, waving colorful category banners with their logo images, and holding up both physical and holo-projected placards. They're chanting, "Champions, champions, give us the top 10!" And "The games are forever, but the results are now!" And "Give me my champion!" And "No games, no work!" However, the camera speeds past all these and stops before the signs that read, "Protect the skies, protect us! They are here!" And "The stars are falling!" And "Ancient enemy found Atlantis!" And "Space Pilot Corps, mobilize!" One man stands with his hands upraised and spread apart, projecting a holographic image of a night sky and a strange glowing blob of a pale, washed-out radiance, with a caption projected above it that reads, "Tonight from New Deshret." And then the image is replaced with another view of another night sky, this one showing moving dots of brightness and a caption that says, "Last night in Ubasti." Seconds later, the scene is replaced by a third view of yet another sky with another glowing blob of light and the caption, "At dawn in Shuria." These alleged eyewitnesses' images are confusing but powerful and undeniable, the commentator's voice says. So far, our sources cannot verify any of these amateur scene captures to be genuine, and there have been no official comments from the authorities on the nature of these. Indeed, no comments or statements forthcoming as yet from the Imperial Palace or the ISC Assembly Chamber on anything today. But now we're being told that quite a few of the fringe networks worldwide have carried short clips of these eyewitness images taken by local residents in the last 27-hour period. Ordinary people recording views of their skies, including New Deshret, Anktawi, Weret, Seba, Abud, Hemetzaret, and on our side, Ubasti, Shuria, Heneb, and Ptaleon. None of the networks include our affiliates. We are still attempting to get more information for our viewers, and investigative crews have been sent to gather their own footage. That big mass of light, those moving sparks, what is that? The Imperator says over the noise of the TV feed. Are you certain all of these are caused by faulty sensors, Theophon? That's not just New Deshret. They're the only ones having weather tech issues, not Ubasti or Shuria. The ACA director does not answer immediately, but stares frowning at the screen. Then he says, The STA director, however, says, "Not sure if that kind of blur right there is corrupted sensor transmissions, but could be anything. Let me look into this." and he looks down at his wristcom and starts tapping something. The Imperator continues staring at the screen, shaking his head. I will have the SPC patrols do a complete orbital pass and report within the hour, Asen says. He too starts entering something into his wrist device. I stand and watch the swift movements of his large, elegant fingers and the tiny screen band light up on his wrist, racing with data in Atlanteo letters and numerals. Have there been any strange sky sightings here? Shirachtet asks. Anything unusual in today's reports from any of your agencies? Both the directors shake their heads. No, nothing, ACA Director Teophon says. No report scheduled for today. STA Director Benu looks up, then continues tapping on his wrist. The Imperator makes a gruff sound. If this is real, could it be somehow related to our current problem? Meanwhile, the TV feed continues to scroll down the street, showing the various protester signs. My attention is sharply drawn to one group waving familiar signs with images of me holding the yellow grail and the words, Gwen Lark, our Imperatrice, our true goddess. And now they've added new ones. There I am, superimposed upon a night sky, and the caption says, Her voice is Logos. She will save us. I make an involuntary sound of sharply indrawn breath, while a pang of fear hits me in the gut. The Imperator sees the signs with my likeness, hears them chanting, Gebi Goddess! Gebi Goddess! And lifts one finger to the screen. This, he says in a frigid voice, this needs to be stopped. Throttle it before it escalates. Indeed, my imperial sovereign. The first priest replies and casts a chilling look at me. That's horrible, I say, staring back at the priest and forcing myself not to break eye contact so that he is the first one to look away. I agree, this needs to be stopped because it's crazy. It's obviously ignorant nonsense, Asen says at once, frowning at the priest and at his father and throwing me an intense glance. He then resumes observing his wristcom. Director Benu looks up from his. Okay, a quick scan of global satellite imagery of our skies right now shows absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. And SPC orbital reports starting to come in, Asen says. So far, nothing there either. Tell them to range farther out, past orbit, the Imperator says, continuing to stare at the TV feed. Asen raises one brow. Already done. The next pass will be outward toward Olympus, and the Ishtar station has been notified to look inward. Notifications being propagated to all other stations. Good. The Imperator tears himself away from the site of crowd protests and plants one palm down on the desk surface. Now, let's return to the more important problem at hand, containing the Huhvak ship. And so the brainstorming nightmare continues. At some point, we relocate from the Red Office to a more comfortable room in the Imperial quarters with seating for everyone. A very large panel TV is called up so that it hovers before us, showing at least 8 window feeds simultaneously. Asen gives me meaningful looks and gently squeezes my hands when the others are not looking, then insists I rest. So I occupy a spot on the end of the large sofa, grateful for a chance to sit down at last. My chronic, games-induced exhaustion is definitely taking its toll. In addition, I seriously worry about Asen. He's maintaining his usual composed appearance, but I can only imagine how tired and overwhelmed he too must feel underneath his mask of control. It's now evening, and the downtown complex is blazing with artificial illumination, which is featured prominently on the Helra network feed that tends to focus on the larger picture instead of zooming to individuals in the crowd. Free Poseidon News is much more zoom-happy and focuses on interviewing people in the streets, lingering with loving attention of close-ups of provocative captions on signs, angry yelling faces in the various groups, and occasional clusters of uniformed correctors and other law enforcement officers. Other networks offer coverage somewhere in between, interspersed with talking heads roundtable commentary. Topics include the mysterious quake from yesterday and its causes. I cringe. The ongoing protests and the agendas of the groups involved, the individual champions and unresolved tiebreaker contenders in their mental state, the strange lights in the sky conspiracies that sprung up literally overnight all around the globe, and even the imperial bride. I cringe. And now that she's a champion, the upcoming imperial wedding. Now that we've sampled the gist of the news, everyone pays only minimal attention to the feeds, and it's time to get down to business. The first priest and the two directors discuss the possible quantum field containment options. The Imperator makes various calls, some of which are to additional IEC members. Asen deals with the incoming data on his wristcom. I'm the only one simply observing and waiting. Soon, two very quiet Imperial staff members arrive to take notes and draft a formal media statement regarding the game's final ceremony. It is to be held tomorrow at the Kemetarion at the second hour of Ke. Every ticket holder's pass from yesterday's original Stadion event is to be duly honored, but actual seating is to be determined by order of arrival and availability, with additional standing room only arrangements and, if necessary, consolation vouchers. Champions and tied contenders will be notified separately. The statement, after being approved by the Imperator, is forwarded to the media. Minutes later, we get to watch and hear it being read by anchors over the different live feeds, including multiple street-level floating orb holograms projected directly into the gathered crowds like giant iridescent soap bubbles filled with moving pictures and sound. The crowds respond immediately, and now on all the channels there's the noise of cheers and jubilation. But most of the people don't disperse, and some groups continue yelling their angry slogans regardless while milling around the downtown complex. The Imperator shakes his head watching them. Ah, you can't please these Chazufs, my sovereign lord, Hijab Teophon says, with a gesture of disgust at the media feeds. Tomorrow this time, they will be satisfied and happy, the first priest says. Give them time, yes, Rovad Benu nods. Now, as far as the effectiveness of performing the maintenance sequence immediately after the Imperial oral block, just as the ship goes silent, and they continue their discussion. Asen sits on the sofa, once again right next to me. His wrist comm emits a tone, but thankfully it's just a mass announcement addressed to me as a champion contender, instructing me to be at the final ceremony tomorrow with detailed instructions. After glancing at the message and arching one brow, Asen leans back and closes his eyes momentarily. His hand slips over mine, resting there, warming my skin. Then he opens his eyes again and leans in closer to me. I'm sorry, Gwen. You'll have to put on that damned uniform once more. Tomorrow. Hang in there, he whispers. Amrevu. You too. I barely mouth the words and move in closer against him. My own fingers twine with his, then gently sweep upward along his forearm, feeling the toned warmth of his muscles through the sleeve. Squeezing his arm gently, I linger there, grounded, and even now sensually energized by his physical presence. The thought of wearing the white vocalist uniform yet again makes me sick. I feel like I'm trapped in an eternal haze of unrelenting tension, of waiting. I don't know for what. Thoughts of my fellow contenders plague me, and I try to imagine what the other members of Team Lark must be thinking about right now, especially Chihar and Lolo, who are still tied with other contenders in their categories and will find out tomorrow whether or not they won. Distracted by a common stress state, Asen and I sit, aside from the others, and only half listen to them argue about the ship. Some of the ArcShip solutions being brought up and discarded as impossible, unreliable, or otherwise useless are combining the Imperial oral block sequence with the annual maintenance sequence. We'll try it once, but it will likely be for nothing. Creating a secondary quantum field all around the stadium complex. Too difficult to maintain, too complicated, will not work, public will notice. Relocating the ship. Insanity. At some point, I sigh and speak up. Why not just fry the damn thing, I say tiredly, recalling my threat to the Imperator earlier this morning in his red office. If it's so much impossible trouble, and if its active state can bring the ancient enemy, why not just destroy it once and for all? And as everyone turns to stare at me as if I've gone crazy, I continue. Seriously, what's the big deal? So it's an old ancient vessel with all kinds of amazing priceless artifacts. I totally get that, but it's not like you expect to have to fly it again. Besides, you can fry it selectively. Just the dangerous parts. Put all the rest in a museum.